Hello. Today I like to talk about the nomenklatura. Nomenklatura is a Latin name for list. The nomenklatura in the Soviet Union. We have to start from the Revolution 1917, when the Communist Party took over and was responsible to the administration, political, economical, and civil society as well. So the Communist Party made a list, and those lists were called nomenklatura. Passing time in the 20s and 30s, the name was a reflection of the list or the names, but it started, I think, about after the Second World War, took a different meaning, took the meaning of the like the establishment in the USA. In other words, the people who belonged to the Communist Party and who were ruling the Soviet Union. There were some other names too to the nomenklatura, but with a lesser rank, so to speak. Those were the apparatchik. Apparatchik was the people who were in the apparatus. But I'd like to refer to the nomenklatura as a sort of establishment or a network of people that used to direct and rule, in some sense, the Soviet Union through the Communist Party. Of course, they led a different life from the ordinary citizens, but the gap was not such unequal or such a great gap between the ordinary citizens and the political or the so-called nomenklatura. Of course there were differences, but anytime we have division of labor, we have different incomes as well. So, the medical doctor doesn't make a better living than the ordinary, let's say, taxi driver. But what I like to point out is that, like in the capitalist system in the 20th century, in the second part of the 20th century, that I refer in my previous talk, something emerged in this type of complex societies, which is in the middle, and in the socialist country happens too, and we have the equivalent of the middle class in the capitalist countries. It started probably in the Khrushchev era, when he starts with some change in the economy. and those were driven by an economist whose name was Lieberman. In the year, I'm thinking about the year 65, 63, 64, around that period of time. And that system was later approved by the Supreme Soviet, and even in the Brezhnev era, stayed as a regular system of accounting. But in different areas, not in the whole system. But what called my attention is that it took the profit as a reflection of the viability of enterprises, or socialist enterprises. And I bring this question about the economy because it changed, in a sense, the socialist idea. Enterprise might be efficient, might be produce not profit, but of course some gains. But in accounting, we can establish from a different point of view, which is not especially profit, but is a return for the company to be able to reinvest funds, which is different idea or philosophical point of view from the capitalist, which is strictly based on profit system. And the profit system, the profit goes to the stockholders, to the owners, whatever. In a society, in a socialistic economy, profits, or let's say returns, are reinvested or distributed with the participant of the production. But this was a main shift in the socialist thinking, because especially the managers, and I'm talking about the enterprises, but they start to thinking in different terms. And the society as a whole, the so-called Nomenklatura, they were start thinking a sort of consumption, because those people were the ones who were able to, some of them, to travel to the Western countries, and they saw how the middle class or their colleagues, there were the kind of style of living were making, and they thought they liked it very much. Of course, they had a luxury consumption, which didn't happen in the Soviet Union, or especially we are talking about a socialist country, where comfort is very important, but luxury is redundant. It's not the need. But things were changing in the years 70 and exploded in the 80s. When we're talking about the nomenklatura, this is inclusive. Is inclusive term to the also to the managers, but also to professionals, engineers, scientists, and writers, which was called the intelligentsia. The intelligentsia is not the intelligence that we think in the western part of the world, so like a spy system or something. No, it does is the name in Russia might be in that sense the informatsia. But informatsia also means propaganda. And those things were preparing the thinking of this part of this segment of the Soviet Union, not all of them, but some of them, that start thinking about to change the system, but not change in a socialist direction, but mainly in a capitalist direction, in the capitalist consumer culture. Until we have Yuri Andropov, was president after prime secretary after the death of Brezhnev, Chernyenko, but he lasted for a very brief time because he died also like Yuri Andropov. And then a man who was called Gorbachev who was a protege of Yuri Andropov, and that's the way he got the premiership in the Soviet Union, and later on the title of president of the Soviet Union. So my point is that in society with division of labor, we have different type of incomes. In a socialist society like the Soviet Union, they had some privilege, of course, but in comparison with the privilege that the upper middle classes styles of living in the United States and some other European countries, it was just like a very lower middle classes. So the gap wasn't that much from the regular citizens. But the reason I'm thinking about the nomenklatura is because those people were the most skilled and educated people, and when the restoration of the capitalist systems or the bourgeoisie counter-revolution, whatever name you like to put it, in the year 91, and the dissolution and capitulation of the Soviet Union, those were the people who became part of the new systems, and instead of calling them nomenklatura, we can call them middle classes. Some of them, very few of them, who also have the connections, but they have the international connections with business people, with business leaders all over the world, especially in the Western countries, especially in the small country in the Middle East. And people were positioned in the banking system and information system and mass media systems. Those very few who were also well positioned in the energy sector, in the banking sector, and in the big corporation of the Soviet Union, those were the ones who got the big piece of the cake, and are referred as the oligarchs. But what I like to talk today is about the new emerging middle class in the Russian Federation, that they jump in the living style way above the one they had prior, that was the living style in the Soviet Union. And who pays for this? Well, the great majority of the Russian citizens, they lower their standards of living. The same thing we can say about the Chinese Revolution. It started in year 1948 with Mao Zedong and lasted until his death in the year, I think, 75. 73, 75. And then it was replaced by the capitalist system with Deng Xiaoping. And we have the China we have today. But Chairman Mao saw, I think, that particular problem, that the emerging, with of course division of labor in the Chinese communist society, of people who were skilled professors and professionals, and he tried to make of China a truly Marxist-Leninist society, and fails. But he thought about this problem and started the Cultural Revolution, which lasted until his death. So we can see the problem of the middle classes, Nomenklatura in Soviet Union. They have a different name in China, which I don't know. And they tried to suppress it, but he was not successful. And then probably he made things worse with the Cultural Revolution, but that's a different story. So I've been talking about the middle classes in my talks because I insist that it's a phenomenon that is new in society, because the middle classes didn't exist before the truly developed capitalist systems. And if we see the amount in the global perspective, and they talk about 1 billion people or some more. And what I like to point out especially is this group, this segment of the global population, and on any given country, they live a real good life. So my point is that as long as the middle classes don't change their views, they will support the capitalist system, even with the crisis that we all know and with the problems that we see every single day, but the system is still working for the benefit of very few people. But there are people that the so-called middle classes, they don't need any type of socialism, because probably, I'm talking about the upper layers of the middle class, probably their living standards will be lower. You will see the living standards of the middle classes. When I refer to the middle classes, and I read the other day a Swiss corporation that state that the middle class person is the one who have an income the double of the median income of a given country. So if I remember well, in Italy, by example, is 3,000 euros a month per person. In the United States, might be about, the median is about $40,000 or something around that. So it might be an income of about $80,000, $100,000. There is another researcher, another research done by a corporation. I don't like to name it because I may confuse the numbers, and it doesn't have sense that get involved in that particular problem. But they talk about middle classes, the one who make more than $10 a day, which is, we all know that $10 a day is not almost nothing in the Western world. And the reason I think that always they try to include so many people, so many layers of the population in the world population, is because they like to make the apology of the capitalist systems. So all of a sudden we have a world where most people are the middle classes, and when we think about middle classes, we think of people who have a real decent standard of living. But how can be a person who happened to make an income of $10 or $20 a day be a middle class? It's impossible. My personal idea is that a middle class family is the one who can afford to own a house, an apartment, to have health insurance, to send their kids to private universities, to travel, to do frequent international travels, to live with a very high standard of comfort and entertainment and country clubs and all those things, that they are able to do it with not much effort. We can take the the cruise in the Mediterranean, or hotels who happen to charge $200, $300 a day starting with. Of course, salaried persons, which they think they are middle class, or there's nothing wrong with that, they can travel and have many of those luxuries, but they can do it with a lot of effort and also getting in depth. And that's the reason that so many people travel and things like that, which is not a bad thing, but their incomes are not the incomes of the truly middle class family. And that's my point, because I am trying to think always in the socialist perspective, and then think about the geopolitics and the world we live in. And in the future talks, I will be more specific about the problems we're facing nowadays. For today, I think that is what I have to say. Thank you.